Well, this was a very long show. At times, a little bit frustrating to watch due to the app and platform in which I was viewing the pay per view on. A few flaws here and there. The crowd wasn't alive completely for some of the matches, especially some of the ones in the middle. But overall, top to bottom, I still found this to be another good show from AEW. Not one of their stronger pay-per-views overall, but still a very good show. And we are here today to break down exactly why I feel that way. What's going on, everyone? This is DerekJ Speaks, and today we are talking about AEW Double or Nothing 2022 live from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. AEW celebrated their 3-year anniversary this month, and for the first time in 3 years, Double or Nothing was finally back in Las Vegas, which was for the better. You know, it matches the whole motif and theme of the show, so it's good that they were back in Vegas this year. And AEW put on, like I said, a very good show. Not one of their stronger ones. They were on a bit of a hot streak there. Their last couple of pay-per-views were just all excellent. I would not use the word excellent to describe this show, but I would use the word good, if not very good. You had the conclusion of a very long story between MJF and Wardlow, and also the conclusion of a very short story with just MJF over the last 24 hours as to whether he would even show up for the pay-per-view. He was there, and he did his job, and the job, for Wardlow, making him look strong, and finalizing that feud. We had a very good women's championship match between Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb. We had Anarchy in the arena, which was just insane. We get a lot of garbage matches like this on AEW pretty frequently, but this one was pretty crazy. But that was not one of the biggest things on the show. We also had some regular wrestling matches that were really good too. We had a really good 6-man tag with the House of Black and Death Triangle. There was a random singles match between Darby Allin and Kyle O'Reilly that the crowd really was not all the way up for throughout the entirety, but they did put on a really good match. And the 3-way tag team championship match right before the main event had the unfortunate job of following Anarchy in the arena, but I think they did a great job and they put on a very fun match. And of course, in the main event, had a big fight feel, and in the end, we did indeed crown a new AEW World Champion, that being CM Punk, with a crowd that was completely hot for that entire match from start to finish, and made for a very strong conclusion to this pay-per-view. This very long pay-per-view. But in order to go through the entire thing, let's start from the very beginning. We go to the buy-in show where we had a tag team match with the team of Tony Nese and his manager slash lawyer, or I think he's the manager for Tony Nese, but he's the lawyer for MJF and potentially the former manager of Jade Cargill. We'll get into that a little bit later. But it is Smart Mark Sterling. He teamed up with Tony Nese to take on the newest tag team sensation in AEW, Hookhausen, that being Hook and Danhausen. This little duo has quickly gotten super over with the crowd. Their antics and back and forth have been mainly exclusive to Rampage in the last few months, but the people love Hook. They also really love Danhausen, and these two teamed up here. The match was total comedy filler. It really wasn't that long. I think the match started about 10 till 8 on the pre-show, so you knew you weren't going to get a whole lot from it, but for what it was, the fans were eating it up. Hook had Mark Sterling pretty much dead to rights, but then Danhausen asked for the tag. He got the tag in. He came in and put his foot on the chest of Mark Sterling to get the 1, 2, 3, and Hookhausen, in their first outing together as a tag team, picks up the victory. We will see how far this pairing will go. Hopefully it's not a permanent tag team and Hook will be relegated to just competing in this tag team. If you want, you can maybe keep Danhausen almost as a lackey for Hook and then keep Hook as the singles badass star and kind of have Danhausen loosely follow him, but otherwise I have no great interest in seeing these two be a permanent tag team. But the fans here in Vegas and many of the fans in recent weeks who have seen these two together, they pop huge for them, so we'll see how that carries them. Opening the show, the first match was Wardlow versus MJF. Like I mentioned, this has been a long brewing story. It's been going on for months now, but this story takes us back years. This is years in the making, ever since MJF first introduced us all to Wardlow as his bodyguard. We've seen the tension start to build for months now until finally Wardlow turned his back on MJF at the last pay-per-view, Revolution, and cost him his dog collar match with CM Punk. Wardlow tried to part ways amicably, but of course MJF put him through the ringer to get to this spot, to get this opportunity, to get his hands on MJF and win his freedom. He went through many obstacles and hurdles to get to this point, but he got here. And the story and the stuff that they have been doing on TV these last few weeks, these last few months, has been great. And it has probably been the best thing about AEW television for these last few months. But then, 24 hours ago, or a little over 24 hours ago at this point, we all heard the news that MJF no-showed a meet and greet, and the likelihood of him potentially leaving and walking out and no-showing the pay-per-view became a strong possibility. And then as Sunday began to roll on, you had differing news and reports and rumors of whether or not MJF was even at the building. At one point, they pulled all promotion for the match. They pulled a video promoting the match off their YouTube channel. They pulled photos of it off of Instagram and Twitter. But then, quietly, all those videos and photos went back up. And it was pretty much confirmed that MJF would be there. There was no direct mention of any of this situation on the pre-show. And then, I believe it was Dave Meltzer who posted on Twitter that this would be the opening match. So we get here, they play MJF's music, and of course he does not come out right away. Lets you play with the idea of the doubt. But then eventually MJF does come out. He's in the ring. Wardlow is in the middle of making his entrance. They show him backstage in some kind of holding cell. But in the background, you can hear the crowd chanting, "He showed up," in reference to MJF, which I thought was funny. This match, it was never going to be this technical masterpiece. It was never going to be this 5-star in-ring mat classic. It was going to be a brawl, but it was much more one-sided than I thought it was going to be. Wardlow basically buried and squashed MJF on this show in this match, but it was pretty fitting to the story. After all the shit that Wardlow had to go through at the hands of MJF over these last few months, you had to pay off this story and make Wardlow look as dominant as possible, and they basically did that. You had MJF try to weasel his way out of this match. I think he had an eye poke early on in the beginning. He tried to fake a knee injury, which the crowd chanted bullshit at. The crowd wanted nothing to do with MJF in this match, and they were all in on Wardlow. So MJF had his back turned, he was on his knees, and it looked like he was reaching for the Dynamite Diamond ring. Then the referee caught him. He tried to beg and plead with Wardlow to change his mind, offered to double his pay, even triple his pay. And then Wardlow shook his hand, and then when MJF went to turn away, of course, Wardlow smiled, pulled him back in, and thus began the Powerbomb Symphony. He powerbombed him, gave him the big first powerbomb, and of course, the crowd went crazy for it. He powerbombed him a few more times. In fact, I believe he got up to 5 powerbombs. He went to cover him with his boot over MJF's chest, but then as the referee was counting, Wardlow casually took his foot off and the count stopped. Then Wardlow got MJF back up, hit him with a few more power bombs, hit him with the 8th power bomb, the 9th power bomb, and then got him in position, got the crowd all revved up and ready, lowered the straps, got him up, and came down with the 10th power bomb and got the 1, 2, 3. Wardlow is finally free from MJF. He's finally free from his contract, and he is free to sign with All Elite Wrestling, which Tony Schiavone got up from the commentary table and immediately announced that Tony Khan has officially made Wardlow All Elite. So after all these years, Wardlow is an official member of the AEW roster. As for MJF, he was carried out on a stretcher. You had doctors and officials tending to him on the stretcher. One doctor placed an oxygen mask on him, but did so by having the mask cover his nose and eyes. Now, I could be completely wrong. I'm not the biggest medical profession in the world, but I don't think it works that way. So that was a little embarrassing to see. But they stretchered MJF out of the arena. Of course, he was met with "You deserve it" chants from the crowd, and you could even see him flipping off the crowd as he was getting stretchered away. And so goes MJF, potentially for the last time, if all the reports and rumors of this heat between MJF and Tony Khan are true regarding his contract status and wanting to restructure his current deal ahead of him potentially re-signing or not re-signing a new deal at the beginning of 2024 when the contract expires. Who knows? But clearly there is some animosity there, but it was not strong enough to prevent MJF from doing the right thing and coming to this show, getting in that ring, and doing the honors for Wardlow, putting him over as strongly as he possibly could, and making him look like a complete badass monster, and finally ending this story in a satisfactory way. I know many people felt a little underwhelmed by this match. It did feel a little shortchanged, and I imagine the situation with MJF probably played a factor in that, but overall, what happened here was the right outcome. So, going forward, who knows? I don't believe MJF is going anywhere. I believe he might take some time off. I believe they might take him off television for a while, but ultimately he'll be back, and he will be back on television in some prominent role. And even in spite of all this mess that he has been doing these last few months, these last few days, I should say, he does still bring value. So much so that I still would consider putting that world championship on him and giving him a run with that title. As for Wardlow, I wouldn't put him anywhere near that world title just yet. If anything, I'd have him go back after the TNT championship, considering the fact that the one shot he had at that title a few months ago, he got screwed over by MJF. And now that Scorpio Sky's schedule is cleared of all Frankie Kazarian and Sammy Guevara business, he can eventually put that title on the line against Wardlow and give him the belt and do a complete restart, refresh on that championship. But I'll get more into the TNT title stuff later on into the show. But as for Wardlow here, good for him. The next match, I guess the first actual match of the show, was the Hardys taking on the Young Bucks. The Elite versus the Delete. This is a match we have seen before. We saw it in Ring of Honor shortly before the Hardys returned to WWE. Here in AEW, they were building up, especially with the promo package, how special and how big of a deal this was, but it did feel kind of slapped together. There was only really 2 weeks worth of build and hype for this match being made official, so it did not come off that special. And the match itself, especially early on, I'd say for the first 60% of it, it really was not feeling special. In fact, it was pretty rough to see. I'm sure there was a lot of selling from Jeff Hardy and Matt Hardy, but they looked very slow and sluggish at different points in the match. A little bit later on too, but really in the early part, especially Jeff, it looked very rough and a little uncomfortable at times. But the fans were really into the Hardys. They hated and despised everything that the Young Bucks were doing. They even gave Brandon Cutler a pop at one point. But they just despised the Young Bucks, who were playing up their cocky douchebag roles, which they do very well. But yeah, the early parts of this match were just not all that great. But things started to pick up a little bit. At one point, we saw Matt Hardy hit Matt Jackson with a side effect on the ring apron. So that took him down. Back in the ring, they hit the Poetry in Motion on Matt Jackson. We see Jeff Hardy go up top, going for the Swanton Bomb, but he missed. Matt picked him up and hit him with, Matt Jackson, sorry. Matt Jackson hit Jeff Hardy with a twist of fate, took him down, and then Nick Jackson went up top, hit Jeff with a Swanton Bomb, but it was only good for a 2 count. Matt and Jeff were both on their knees facing the Young Bucks, and they were getting met with rapid super kicks, one after another, then double super kicks for each of them. Matt and Jeff were egging them on to do it, and they got him down, went for a double cover, but got a double count, or a kick out, I should say. We saw steel steps introduced on the outside, but eventually Matt Jackson, who was the one to introduce the steps, he ended up getting laid out on these steel steps. And back in the ring, we see Jeff Hardy go up top, and he comes down with a swanton onto Matt Jackson, onto the steel steps. Then back in the ring, we see Matt Hardy hit Nick Jackson with the Twist of Fate, only good for a 2 count. Nick tried to roll up Matt, but Matt got out of it, hit Nick with the side effect, hit him with another Twist of Fate, tagged in Jeff, and then Jeff went back up top, hit another Swanton Bomb, and the Hardys get the win. Rough match, but those last 5 or so minutes were really fun, and they definitely came alive, and the crowd was really into it. So they redeemed themselves just a little bit. Up next was the TBS Championship match. Jade Cargill defending her championship against Anna Jay. This match definitely did not feel important. It was announced randomly on an episode of Rampage like a week or 2 ago. There was no real fire into it. It's not like Jade and Anna Jay have been really feuding much over the last few weeks. They've had a match before on TV, which honestly was better than this match, but this feud just really did not feel important on this show, and it didn't feel that important to a lot of people in the arena because you could visibly see people in the background getting up and leaving and probably heading to the concession stands or heading to the bathroom. So this was essentially the early bathroom break for many people, but I did stick around and watch, and I gotta give them credit. The effort was there. Both women were trying. There were different spots that were trying to get the crowd into it and trying to get them to believe that Anna Jay had a chance in hell of winning that championship. They did rely on some bells and whistles here. We had the baddies interfere, Kiera Hogan and Red Velvet, but Anna laid them both out with double DDTs on the outside. We saw Mark Sterling. He came back out. He had a crutch and he was distracting the referee, and while doing that, he slid a crutch into the ring, meaning to give it to Jade, but Anna Jay intercepted it. She got it, hit Jade with it, locked on and hit her with the Russian leg sweep, and tried to get a cover, but only good for a 2 count. Not long after this, out came John Silver, Johnny Hungy, who ripped off Mark Sterling's neck brace and hit him with a brainbuster. Then we see Anna and Jade go up to the top. Anna's looking to deliver some big move when all of a sudden, walking down the ramp, we see Stokely Hathaway, the former Malcolm Bivens, former manager of Diamond Mine in NXT, who got released, I guess, 30 days ago, because all NXT contracts have a 30-day window where you cannot sign with a new promotion. So that 30 days has now officially expired. And out came Malcolm Bivens, who provided enough of a distraction for Anna Jay to get knocked and then get hit with a Jaded from the middle rope. And that was all she wrote. 1, 2, 3. Jade Cargill is still TBS champion and seemingly has a brand new manager in Stokely Hathaway. I don't know if Stokely and Mark Sterling are both going to be her manager or if this is the end of Mark Sterling, but we do know Stokely Hathaway is with her. He got in the ring, raised her arm, was with the baddies, all that. They all surrounded Anna Jay, looking to go in for another attack. When out came Chris Statlander. She saved her, got a big pop from the crowd, still outnumbered, but then we heard very unfamiliar theme music, but we soon found out who it belonged to, and that being the debuting Athena, former Ember Moon in WWE. She got in the ring, went face to face, or face to chest, basically, with Jade Cargill, and then both sides faced off. Stokely Hathaway backed away the heels, and they eventually left, and the babyfaces remained and posed and stood for the crowd to cheer. Nice little moment. I'm glad Athena has a home now. I know she's been wanting to have a new place for herself to compete, and she finally is here in AEW, and it's good to see Stokely Hathaway, and I believe, as good of a job as Mark Sterling does, and he does a great job, I think the pairing of Jade Cargill and Stokely Hathaway makes a little more sense than with Mark Sterling. So if that's the direction they're going in, I'm all for it. Up next was one of the matches that I was looking forward to the most on this entire show, that being the 6-man tag team match with the House of Black taking on Death Triangle, that being Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews against Pac, Rey Fenix, and Penta Oscuro. This match was just complete insanity from the very beginning. We had different points where both sides were taunting each other. They were getting each other's heads mentally and playing different psychological warfare tactics against one another. But then the action really started to kick in. The fans were really into this from the beginning, from the jump, and as the match continued and more craziness began to ensue, the crowd was still firmly up for it. I was firmly into it. too many crazy things to call all of it. Not nearly as crazy as other matches later on in this show, but there was a lot of craziness that went down. There was a scary moment in this match, though. We had a series of dives to the outside, as you would expect in a match like this. But Brody King was left all by himself in the middle of the ring at one point. And seeing a bunch of guys all piled up on the outside, he too attempted to do a dive over the top rope onto the pile. But in doing so, he grazed the apron, his neck, and back of his neck and head met the apron, but he did the rest of the way connect with the other people. He seemed to be fine. He didn't really sell like he was hurt, at least not immediately, and I really couldn't tell if he was selling anything later on in the match. Maybe hyped up on a lot of adrenaline, but then when he went to the back and that adrenaline wore down, he was in pain. But I haven't heard anything. It just looked very scary. We saw Keith Lee do a big dive later on in the night. It's very impressive when these big guys do these dives, but I do not need to see it. And it's because of stuff like this. Even if he's fine, he could also have not been. And I'm fine if we don't see it, or at least not that kind of dive. Can we just not do that kind of dive? Can we do a different dive? Maybe a cross body, something a little bit more where you don't have to risk having your neck smash into the ring apron, preferably something like that. I don't know. At one point, the Lucha Brothers hit double super kicks on Buddy. Then they went to double super kick Brody, but Brody did not go down, and so they tagged in Pac and ended up hitting Brody with a triple super kick. That finally took him down. On the ring apron, we saw Penta flip over Phoenix and hit a Canadian Destroyer on Buddy Matthews. That took him down. They delivered a double diving stomp into a DDT on Brody King on the outside, and that left Malachi Black all by himself in the middle of the ring. He held his own for a while, but he couldn't outlast them for too long. It came down to Black and Pac when we see Alex Abrahantes get up on the apron. He's distracting the referee, and Pac low blows Malachi Black, just kicks him right in the balls. Goes up top, looking for the black arrow when the lights went out. And then when they came back on, we see Julia Hart in the ring. She spits mist up into the eyes of Pac. He comes crashing down off the top, gets hit with a kick, or big roundhouse kick from Malachi Black. And it's 1, 2, 3, and the House of Black wins this very good 6-man tag team match. And they now have a new member of the House of Black, that being Julia Hart. They have been teasing this direction for months now. We've seen it kind of subtly in the background. Julia Hart with the remainder of the Varsity Blondes. She's had the eye patch on. She's been acting very oddly. And we thought we were going to get the moment a few weeks ago, but then it didn't happen. But now we finally got it here. And so this is a big opportunity for Julia Hart. She's like 20 years old. This is probably going to be the most important thing she'll ever do in a wrestling company up to this point. So good for her. And hopefully, whether this is the end of this feud or not, hopefully going forward, we will see more of the House of Black and preferably more of Malachi Black on TV going forward. Not just Rampage and random matches against Fuego del Sol, but actual high-profile, prominent, important matches on Dynamite and Rampage on a more consistent basis. Or in-ring promos, whatever gets this guy on TV more often, I'm all for it. Up next, we had back-to-back the finals of the Owen Hart Foundation tournaments. Up first was the finals of the men's tournament. Came down to Samoa Joe and Adam Cole. They had a pretty good match. Mike Chioda was brought in to be the referee. it was a good match. It was a solid match. It just did not really feel all that important, which it was supposed to be, because it was the finals of this big grand tournament that they've been promoting for months now. But it just felt like another match, and the finish felt like basically another finish where Adam Cole hit the last shot and got the win. So Adam Cole is the winner of the 2022 Men's Owen Hart Foundation Tournament. And then that was that. Bobby Fish came out to kind of interfere, but this was basically as clean as it could be. So that was the end of the men's tournament. And then up next, we had the finals for the women's tournament. And this match felt far more important than the men's, solely thanks to the entrances. We had Britt Baker. She made her entrance first, was played out to Fozzy guitarist Rich Ward. Pretty cool entrance, very nice. But then Ruby Soho came out with Rancid performing for her. Of course, Rancid, the ones responsible for the Ruby Soho song, and they did a tremendous job. It was great. It was a really cool, badass moment. Of course, you were cutting to people in the crowd who were singing along. It felt very special. And then when they were done, got a huge standing ovation. So all of that by itself made this match feel far more important and far more worthy of the finals and end of a tournament than the men's match prior did. But then the match actually started and didn't really live up to that anymore. The fans were kind of split. There were chants for both women, but I don't know, I couldn't really tell which one was getting more cheers than the other. I think up to a certain point, Ruby was getting more cheers than Britt was, so I think the fans were a little more into Ruby getting the win here. But it's not what happened. You see both women, actually before that, Britt tried to lock in the lockjaw, but Ruby avoided it. And then Ruby locked in a submission of her own, a sharpshooter. Very fitting, seeing as how this is the Owen Hart tournament. Well, this sharpshooter did not look all that great. In fact, it looked a little ugly. And it's not the first ugly sharpshooter on this show. But she tried, I guess. It was kind of modified. It didn't really look all that well. And speaking of not really looking all that well, that brings me to the finish, where after a series of roll-ups and victory rolls, it was Britt who got the final victory roll and won. She got the win here. She wins the Owen Hart tournament for the women, and that was that. She went up the ramp, was met by Tony Schiavone, who was giving her a hug. Then out came Adam Cole to kind of stop that, and the two kissed and celebrated their victory. And then out came Tony Khan, escorting out Martha Hart, of course the widow of Owen Hart. She congratulated both Adam Cole and Britt. She thanked the fans, she thanked Tony Khan and everyone for keeping the memory of her late husband alive. And of course, she presented both Adam and Britt with custom honorary championship belts. And of course, they had t-shirts. So, special moment as far as that's concerned. A little predictable that Adam Cole and Britt Baker would be your winners. But I guess that's just the visual that Tony Khan wanted, and that's what we got here. The matches themselves, a little weak, but it was a special moment. It was a special thing, and I'm just happy to see Owen Hart honored in some way on a major wrestling show, and Martha Hart be okay with it, so long as it's not WWE, but she's okay with it. So it looks like this might become a yearly thing. I don't know if they're going to always do this around the time of Double or Nothing, but maybe next year, let's do a little better job of booking this tournament, maybe a little bit more forward thought into brackets and matches and match length and all that, and match positioning, and making it a little bit more special going forward. So that's that. Up next, we had a 6-person tag team match. The team of the Men of the Year, All Ego Ethan Page and the TNT champion Scorpio Sky, and the in-ring debut of Paige Van Zant. She was teaming up with the Man of the Year, taking on the team of Sammy Guevara, Ty Conti, and Frankie Kazarian, with the stipulation here that if Ty, Sammy, and Frankie lost, then Sammy and Frankie could never again challenge Scorpio Sky for the TNT Championship. And this entire storyline involving Scorpio Sky and Sammy Guevara, Frankie Kazarian was kind of brought in at the last minute, but mainly, specifically, the stuff with Sammy and Scorpio and Ty Conti, all that stuff has just been the drizzling shits on these AEW shows, specifically Rampage, because that's where we mainly see it. But it's just been so bad. It's been so awful. There's no one to cheer for. Scorpio Sky, it looked like he was heading in the direction of a babyface turn, but then they chopped that off. Sammy is completely unlikable. Him and Ty come off extremely unlikable, which you saw on full display in this match. So I don't know what they're even doing with them. They have them on the babyface side, but yet they just present them and they make them come off as such unlikable heels. So I was rooting for the Men of the Year and Paige Van Zant to get the win here. So never again we could see Sammy or Frankie challenge for that championship, and that'd be the end of it. So it's very difficult to find anyone to root for in this match, but I did pop for certain points in this match. Throughout the entire match, Frankie and Sammy and Ty were arguing. Sammy was doing a bunch of flashy stuff and just showing off, trying to impress Ty Conti. That's the story that the commentators were pushing, and it was pissing off Frankie to a point where we see Sammy and Ty kissing in the ring, and then they're surrounded by the other heels, Scorpio, Paige Van Zant, and Ethan Page. And when they ask Frankie to get in the ring, he just flips him off and gets down onto the floor, and Sammy and Ty are just attacked. Then later on, the baby faces, I put that in parentheses, they get back in the ring and they clean house. But then Ty Conti is arguing with Frankie Kazarian, but Frankie has his back turned to Sammy, and Sammy goes and hauls off and tries to super kick Frankie in the back of the head, but Frankie ducks, and Sammy super kicks the hell out of Ty Conti. Good sell job by her here, and this was one of the biggest pops of the entire night. The fans really could not care less about this match, but they popped huge for this moment here. So Sammy takes down Ty, and then Frankie's taken out, and then he gets hit with the TKO by Scorpio Sky to get the win. And mercifully, this story is finally over. If you're not going to put the championship on Wardlow, for the love of God, please bring Miro back and let him rescue that TNT championship from this disgusting mess, because Lord does it need it. Up next was Darby Allin versus Kyle O'Reilly, a match that got added to this show just 48 hours ago, just a few days ago on Rampage, when Darby issued the challenge for Kyle O'Reilly. A few weeks ago on Dynamite, there was this big brawl that ended the show. The Undisputed Elite attacked Sting and Darby and the Hardys, and apparently in that exchange, it was Kyle who Pillmanized Sting's leg with a chair, and so Darby was out for revenge, and we got this match here. The fans really did not care about this match. It was announced at the very last minute. It was right in the middle of the show. No one could really get fully into it. But these guys, they put on a hell of a match here. It was short, but it was very stiff. It was very brutal. Within the first few seconds of the match, Kyle caught Darby with a vicious knee to the face that busted his mouth open. A little bit later, apparently, Darby hit some kind of crazy dive, but it looked rough, and the commentators were asking for a replay, but they never got a replay. So I have no idea what happened. I haven't gone back and rewatched it. I couldn't really find it. So I have no idea what the move happened. What happened, because they never did the replay. They did several replays of another different dive that Darby did. One that looked pretty brutal, and it was pretty cool because it was a dive where Darby dove, but then he got caught in midair into a dragon sleeper from Kyle O'Reilly. So I thought that was pretty cool. But in the end, it was O'Reilly who hit a diving knee drop off of the top rope and got the clean victory over Darby Allin. So, very shocked that this match was even added to this show. Even more so shocked that Kyle O'Reilly got the clean win. But good for him. So, very good action here. Again, the fans weren't fully into it. Even I didn't have my attention fully into it for the first minute or two. But once I could really see the stiffness and physicality of this match, I really enjoyed it. So, really good stuff here. It did not need to happen on this show, or at the very least, it probably should have been on the kickoff show, the pre-show, but still good. Up next, the AEW Women's World Championship, Thunder Rosa defending the title against Serena Deeb. The build-up and the promos heading into this show have been lacking and underwhelming and a little disappointing, but there was never a doubt that these two women would go out onto this show and put on a very great match. And that's exactly what they did. A very nice, technical, back and forth wrestling match between two of the best women's wrestlers and two of the best wrestlers in general in the entire world. In the end, Thunder Rosa was the one to retain her championship with the Tiger Thunder Driver. So, Thunder Rosa is still champion. Serena Deeb is still awesome. And no idea what's next for either of these women, specifically Thunder Rosa and her championship. But good stuff here between these two on this show. Up next, oh boy, we had Anarchy in the arena, the Jericho Appreciation Society taking on the team of Santana, Ortiz, Eddie Kingston, Jon Moxley, and Bryan Danielson. Justin Roberts put it best when he was doing the ring introduction, where he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, shit's about to hit the fan." And that was the most accurate statement made on this entire show, because shit hit the fan. We see the Jericho Appreciation come out first in these matching all-white outfits. They look completely ridiculous, but hey, that's Chris Jericho's entire gimmick. Then the babyfaces come out, each of them from different sides of the crowd. They're entering through the crowd, but then the Jericho Appreciation Society splits up and meets them. And then the brawl starts, the match starts, the bell rings, but Jon Moxley's theme song was the first theme song played. And it was the only song played, and it played for a very long time. They played Moxley's theme music as these guys were continuing to brawl in the crowd, and at different points, the camera was rapidly cutting all around, back and forth between different parts of this match. It looked ridiculous. Didn't get much better as the match continued, but for this early part, it looked crazy. But with a lot of this craziness and all the action and the fans singing along to the theme song that is still playing and even looped around and played again, that was pretty cool. I will give them credit. But eventually that stopped because we see Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley make their way over to the sound area, and Jericho gets one of these soundboard equipments and he broke it and stopped the theme song, and the crowd booed. And I thought that was pretty funny. Different people were bleeding. Matt Menard was bleeding. Eddie Kingston was bleeding. I think Bryan Danielson got busted open at some point in this match too. There might have been other people. I don't know. Maybe Moxley. But this match was just completely insane. Very appropriate that you hear that siren in the background, if you can hear that in the background, talking about this match, because this match deserved to hear noises like this, because it was just absolutely brutal. It was all over the place. You saw fighting up on the concourse, fighting in the crowd, fighting up on the apron, fighting on the stage, on the ramp, all over the place. Absolutely insane. We see Santana and Ortiz hit a neckbreaker powerbomb combo on Jake Hager, put him through 2 tables. We see Moxley trying, kind of unsuccessful, but he tried to hit Jericho with a jib camera. We see Eddie Kingston and Matt Menard fighting in the crowd. We see them fighting up onto the concourse, and Eddie Kingston pouring and squirting mustard and ketchup all over Matt Menard. We see Mox pick up a giant cooler filled up with water and a bunch of other stuff, and he just chucked it right into Chris Jericho's face. At one point, Daniel Garcia came to help his fellow Jericho Appreciation Society member in Matt Menard, and he fought off Eddie Kingston. He took his belt off and wrapped it around Kingston's throat and choked and dragged him across the concourse. We see Jericho try to lock in the walls of Jericho on Moxley on the timekeeper's table, but then once he went to lock it in, the table immediately broke. We see a bloody Bryan Danielson delivering yes kicks to Jake Hager over by the barricade, but then Hager ended up suplexing Bryan onto the ramp. We see Moxley in the ring undoing the top rope and basically exposing that top part of the rope. Looked just a mess in the ring. Eddie Kingston and Daniel Garcia, they're continuing to fight on the concourse, and they even fought into a freight elevator that ended up closing. So the two of them disappeared for a brief period of time. Santana and Ortiz bust out a giant ladder and each climb different parts of it and dive down onto both Angelo Parker and Matt Menard respectively through tables. So they take them out. We see Jericho blast Moxley in the face with a fire extinguisher. We see Mox and Danielson make a comeback and start beating down Jericho and Jake Hager. They locked in dueling submissions, with Danielson locking in Jericho with the label lock and Moxley putting the bully choke on Hager. When out came Eddie Kingston with a giant thing of gasoline, and he came in and started pouring it all over Jericho, but in doing so, he also poured some of it on Danielson. And so Danielson was upset about this. He gets up in Eddie Kingston's face. The two of them have no love lost. They hate each other. They start to brawl there too. Jon Moxley tries to separate them and break them apart, but then Chris Jericho comes back in with a steel chair, hits it over the back of Moxley, uses it on the others. He knocks out Eddie Kingston with the Judas effect, and then now it's Bryan Danielson all by himself fighting off Jake Hager and Chris Jericho. He hit a running knee on Hager, and then Jericho, who had the steel chair in his hand, Bryan hit the running knee again, knocked the chair into Jericho's face. He went to, as Bryan so eloquently said it, I should say, he went to kick Jericho's fucking head in, but then Jake Hager came in with Jericho's bat, Floyd, and hit Bryan in the back of the leg with it and beat him down. Then we see Jericho lock Bryan in the walls of Jericho, and at the same time, Hager gets the ring rope that's still been undone, and he wraps it around Bryan's throat and begins to choke him out. And Bryan is trying to fight out of it. No one's there to help him. No one's there to save him. He passes out, and the match ends with the Jericho Appreciation Society getting the win in an unbelievable match. And all the stuff that I said here ain't even the half of what happened in this match. because I'm sure there was a lot of other craziness that happened in this match that the cameras didn't even pick up. They were trying to get all of it as they could, but it was just a lot going on here. As for the Jericho Appreciation Society getting the win here, they kind of took the wind out of the sails of the crowd, but I expected them to get the win because I fully expect this feud to continue and build to a blood and guts match, probably on TV at some point over the next month or so, potentially maybe after the next pay-per-view, which is going to be the AEW New Japan joint show Forbidden Door at the end of the month in June. So maybe sometime after that we'll get blood and guts, but I do expect blood and guts to come at some point. But this match, pure craziness. We get a lot of these hardcore multi-person chaos matches on AEW television a lot, but this one was pretty crazy. We cut to a pre-tape of Andrade El Idolo in some conference room, and he is talking about how he wants to sign the best people and the best talent to the Andrade family office. Then there's a knock at the door, and in comes Roosh, who shakes Andrade's hand. I'm sorry, he extended the fist bump out, and both men fist bumped, and now Roosh is a member of the AEW roster and will seemingly be paired off with Andrade. I don't know if they're going to just be two men in the same faction or if they're going to be a tag team. But if they are a tag team, that is definitely one hell of a team to add to an already stacked tag team division in AEW. But very good addition to the roster with Roosh, and pairing him up with Andrade, very good, smart move. We cut to the Men of the Year backstage. Scorpio Sky is relishing in the fact that he is completely done with Sammy and Frankie when in comes Dante Martin, who challenges him to a TNT Championship match. And Scorpio says he'll give him the match when they go to SoCal, which they'll be in California this week, in fact, on Dynamite and on Rampage. So one of those shows I suspect will get that match. Next matchup was the AEW Tag Team title match. Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus with Christian Cage in their corner defending against Team Taz, Ricky Starks, and Powerhouse Hobbs. Of course, the team of Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland. This match had what's pretty much seen as the death spot on a show like this. They just followed that craziness of Anarchy in the arena, and they're the last match before the main event. You would expect the crowd to be dead for this match, but these six went out there and had one of the best matches of the entire show. I might have to think a little harder on it, but this might have been one of my favorite matches of the entire show. If it was not number one, easily number two. This was a really great match. I was a little tired after the previous match and trying to follow along and take notes, so I did take a whole lot of notes during this match. But trust me, it was great. If you did not watch it, please go back and watch it. It was a great match. There were some things that happened. At one point, we had a hoss fight where all three of the big men faced off and collided. It even led to Keith Lee and Powerhouse Hobbs giving Luchasaurus a double chokeslam. So there were some crazy things that happened in this match. Keith Lee also did a dive. I mentioned that earlier. He did a dive. He did clear the apron. But again, I don't need to see these big guys doing these dives anymore. But in the end, the champs retained. Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus, they retained their titles. I did not see that coming. I thought for sure this would be the night. This would be the time where Christian Cage would finally turn on these guys and cost them their titles. But I guess if that day is going to come, it's going to come later on. Because on this show, on this night, the champions remain Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus in, like I said, what was an incredible tag team championship match. And that leads us to the main event. CM Punk challenging Hangman Adam Page for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. The fans were fully into this match. Chants of CM Punk and cowboy shit. Split crowd. The fans were really into this. They cheered both men at the right times. They booed both men equally at different times. Punk got booed. Page got booed. Just depended on the circumstances. At different points in the match, both men were kind of playing to the crowd. That was kind of where some of the boos were coming in. Punk was doing it. Page was doing it. Page was doing it a little more frequently than Punk was doing it. At one point, Page went for the buckshot, but then he got caught by CM Punk, who locked in a sharpshooter. A pretty nice looking sharpshooter compared to some of the other ones that happened earlier in the show. This one looked pretty good. Then one of the black spots of the match, one of the more unsavory, not so good moments of the match. Both men were trading each other's finishers, and Punk went for the buckshot lariat, but when he cleared over the top rope, he kind of slipped up and had to catch himself. I think he fell on his ass, and he popped up, and then there was a bit of a delay, but he did pop up and hit the lariat on Page. But you could tell the look on his face. He looked very disappointed. The fans booed. I don't know if those boos were more so because he stole Hangman's finisher or because he botched it, but still went through with it. And there was that slight feeling in the back of people's minds that he might win with that. But thankfully he did not. Hangman did kick out. And I did like and appreciate the commentators playing up the fact that Punk, he has tried to master the craft and ability to connect with the buckshot lariat, but he just can't do it like Hangman can. So that kind of put over Hangman in a way. So I like that. A little bit later on, Hangman tried to go for the GTS, but Punk slipped out of it. Hangman did hit the Deadeye, but only good for a 2 count. Page went for the GTS again, but Punk grabbed the top rope, then slipped out, hit Page with a roundhouse kick, but Page recovered, hit Punk with a GTS, which looked better than Punk's buckshot, but it was only good for a 2 count. They fight over by the timekeeper's area. Page kind of knocks him over the table. He holds up the championship. He's yelling at Punk, telling him, "This is mine. This is mine." The referee takes it from him, but sets the championship right in the corner of the ring, which is very odd. But then it made sense a few moments later. We see Page go for the buckshot lariat, but when he comes in, Punk immediately catches him in position for the GTS, and as he's swinging Page around, one of Page's heels connects right with the referee, I think it was Rick Knox, and knocks him down. Page slips out. He hits Punk with a lariat. Both men are down. Page goes over to check on the referee, but then he glances over and sees the AEW Championship belt, and there's this bit of hesitation, but eventually he picks it up. He's gearing up, revved up, ready to hit Punk with this championship. Page is determined to prevent CM Punk from winning this championship at all costs. So he's ready to do it, but then as Punk is regaining his consciousness, he's getting on his knees, he's coming back into it, Page is second guessing himself, he's rethinking, and he decides to go against it. He tosses the championship aside, and the fans actually cheered this. They clapped for this because they did not want to see him go down that road. This was very reminiscent of a very similar spot in the match towards the finish of the match with Roddy Piper and Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8 many decades ago. So, and we've seen this spot in other matches too, but that's one of the more famous times I have seen this spot. So Page does not use the championship belt. He goes out on the apron, goes for the buckshot again, but then Punk avoids it, does a slip up, and then hits Page with the GTS, and 1, 2, 3, CM Punk is your new AEW World Champion. Big win for Punk. The fans popped huge. Punk was teary-eyed. He was very emotional over the finish of this match, and that was very good. I thought it was a very good main event, a very nice, strong main event, very well-told story here with the conflict within Page and whether or not he should go that one step further to take down Punk. But because he didn't, his nightmare, his worst fear came true, and that's Punk beating him and becoming the world champion. So I wonder if that might play a factor into a potential rematch down the line. But now CM Punk is champion, this opens up a lot of new possibilities for future challengers, future matches. We have that Forbidden Door show next month. Who's to say Punk won't be defending that championship against somebody on that show? Against a New Japan star. Could be Kenta, battle the GTS moves. Could be Okada, could be anybody. So, very, very interested in seeing what direction they go in with these guys going forward. But as I mentioned at the top of the show, overall, this was a very good show. It was not one of the strongest AEW pay-per-views of all time, but it was very good. And there was enough good on this show for me to call it a good show. And maybe the guy who's revving up his engine outside, if you can hear it, also found this to be a good show, and that's why he's so happily doing that. But that's enough for me, losing my voice here, so I'll go ahead and call it now. Next time, I will be back here talking wrestling in any capacity. Will be next Sunday, covering WWE Hell in a Cell. And then after that, probably going to be talking about the next show, which will be the AEW New Japan Super Show, the Forbidden Door. So, until next time, take care, everyone.